Everybody has had their coffee, and we'll be beginning with our first session in this track. The session is titled Satellites for Effective Disaster Risk Reduction. And I think it's a pretty significant topic to discuss with. We heard our speakers in the morning and we got a good overview of how the space industry is, where it's headed, what India is doing, and now we'll be getting into minute topics to understand the further details of this very large space industry and what are the important aspects of it. And satellites are one major aspect of the space industry which we are all aware of. So in this session, we have our chair, Lieutenant General PGS Pannu, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, retired former Deputy Chief, Integrated Defence Staff Operations. Sir, I would request you to please come on the stage. General Pannu will also be moderating the session. In this session, we also have a special address by Dr. KHV Durga Rao, Group Director, DMSG, NRSC, ISRO. The speakers for the session are Mr. Sanjay Agrawal, DDG DM, Department of Telecom. We have Major General Sudhir, Bahl, retired Senior Consultant, ME and IRS, NDMA. We have Suyash, Singh, co-founder and CEO, GalaxEye Space. We have Stephane, Chenard, Senior Consultant, Euroconsult. And we have Major Sundeep, N, retired, co-founder and CEO, Astroborne Space and Defence Technologies Private Limited. I would request our speakers to please come up on the stage. The number of disasters is increasing globally at an exponential rate, both in frequency and intensity, even under the most conservative forecast. The loss of life and property can be significantly minimized with satellite intelligence and communication for disaster prevention, impact mitigation, and first responder role. And that is what this session is going to elaborate on. On that note, I would hand it over to Pannu sir and request you to please take the session ahead.
Thank you, Ayushi, for introducing the subject. Jen, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. India Space Congress brings people together basically to see how the space is going to empower the growth of humanity and we grow in a peaceful and a prosperous manner. But not everything is in our hands. We can desire to do whatever developmental activity we want to do. We can make our plans, we can build industry. We have been going from industrial revolution to industrial revolution. But there is something which we have to consider which is not directly in our hands. And I'm here not really talking about the disasters and the nature. But when you look at how this globe looked like, say in 1800, we had 1 billion people in this world. And just before that, there was the discovery of coal, which gave rise to the first industrial revolution. And then, of course, gas was discovered. It took us almost 127 years to reach a population of 2 billion. And then after that, another 30 years to double, and then in last 5 decades, we have been adding 1 billion in every 10 to 12 years. Every billion added to the world would mean that so much of extra load is being borne by the same Earth, which had only 1 billion population. Of course, many species which are not in human category are dying. Are we replacing those species who were here walking the earth? No more here, by about 50% are no more there. And the human capital is coming up to a point which is developing in education, research, and heavily we are using the earth moving equipment to move the same earth on which we depend. the kind of infrastructure which has been going on, and how the impact of the nature what it has, and how the human, which is there as outcome of the nature, is doing to the earth. Actually, these are the 2 points, when compressed together, makes one big problem of how are we treating the nature when we are ourselves outcome of nature. But once we actually trigger the industrial cycles of revolution, we have started using this earth to draw all the minerals, and the Artemis agreement is taking us to the moon and the Mars. So are we done with the earth, that now we want to do the same thing to the Mars and to the moon as we did to the earth? This is a question. So I would not go back long, that in 2001, which is in our memories, and we all somewhere or the other either got impacted or we had the news that we had tsunami, which impacted the whole world, and that was a tectonic shift in the Indian Ocean. And we know the impact of the tsunami, and a lot of displacements and a lot of deaths which happened. Sorry, I'm talking about tsunami came in 2004. Before that, we had in 2001 Gujarat, Bhuj got impacted with the earthquake, and then tsunami happened. Then earthquake happened in Pakistan with the impact on Udi, which was in 2005. Uttarakhand 2013, Srinagar 2014, and Nepal disaster 2015. Now when you look at why did floods happen in Srinagar? Really speaking, Kashmir is a valley. It has got only one outlet, and that outlet is Jhelum. And how was the Jhelum River created? Was as an impact of an earthquake, which opened out the water, which was a big lake. Today we call Kashmir Valley. It was all a lake, and an earthquake opened it out and became Jhelum, and from Jhelum the water started moving out. So what happened in 2014 was that so much of rain went in there that only one outlet, which had got created through an earthquake, could not get the entire outlet out, and therefore it took number of days, and we had the same thing which was there earlier as a lake became a lake again, and it took time. There are number of factors which are working on how the earth is going to behave in the future. The core of the earth is actually volcanic, and it is creating impact on the pressure, and there is a tectonic shift which is happening which impacts the Himalayan region as such, where the Everest is actually increasing in height every year by 1 centimeter. And the tectonic shift is happening every year by 10 centimeters. And if you look at how the Gondwana land theory, that it was one Pangea, it got broken, and it started moving away, and the continents got created. The continents actually created also the nation states, and the nation states are at war. So therefore, one is nature does something, the human being does something, and the combined is a big disaster that we are facing today, and we are likely to face more of it. And now I'll give you an example of how the session of today is going to be so fruitful. In 2015, in the month of February, I was heading the special forces. I was the ADGM of special ops. And I was told by the NEA that I have to go to Nepal in February 2000. So what is the matter? Why do I have to go? You have to lead a delegation because they are wanting that in case of an eventuality, India should be able to control the results. So we went, I led a delegation, we were taken all over, and they were saying that 80 years have happened that we've not had an earthquake of the kind. The tectonic shift is happening, we are predicting that there will be an earthquake in it. This is middle of April. And my delegation concluded by saying that, okay, let's have a hotline between India and Kathmandu. Major General Himalayan Thapa was the DGMO with who I had decided that we put a hotline. Then I told them, please give me a disaster map. So they said disaster map will reach you within a few months because we have to work a lot on what can happen. On 25th of April, it was a Saturday, and in the MO Directorate we were having an Army Commanders Conference. And at about 11:30, there was a break, which was a tea break. Normally today also, from 11:30, we had a tea break. So I went to my office for some work. I said, I have to sign some papers, so let me go inside. Two things happened. The moment I switched on the TV, it said Nepal hit by earthquake 7.8 on the Richter scale. I pressed the bell to call somebody, and the officer walks in. He says, sir, the disaster map has come from Nepal. I said, I don't need it. The disaster has already been stuck. I picked up the phone, spoke to Major General Himalayan Thapa. I said, this is what I see on the TV. He says, it's a very bad. Since there was something which we had done in our mind, the next day, entire para brigade was supposed to be going for an exercise. So I rang up Agra to say, your para brigade is on the tarmac, right? I'm sending 2 aircraft. The destination now is Kathmandu. Make sure that your medical and engineering equipment, these 2 companies are ready on the tarmac. 2 aircraft will come and pick you up and straight away go with them. Within 2 hours, the Indian aircraft were landing. Now imagine that how they would have built a disaster map, how they imagined that in 80 years the tectonic shift has happened to a point that there would be an earthquake. And actually it happened in a manner that we did not know it would happen the way it happened, and rest was all experience of handling the earthquake. Himalayan region, the youngest range in the world, is being pushed. It is an artificial range which got created because of the tectonic shift of movement of Pangea, the centrifugal force of the earth. So these are the weakest areas which are high. The highest range or the mountain in the world is here in Himalayas, growing taller. That is where the glacial melts are happening. That is from where the water is coming in. That is where number of places, starting from avalanche to trough to earthquakes to landslides, what have you, Uttarakhand, Kedarnath, all that happened in Kashmir Valley that I'm talking about. So really speaking today, when we are talking about what the satellites can do, India has invested hugely into remote sensing, into Earth observation. But I think what we need to do is, the way the population is growing, we are going to add another 1 billion in next 15 years. Are we going to continue to put load with the earth moving equipment the way we are actually making infrastructure over Himalayas? Are we going to stop infrastructure development with the way the Chinese are sitting on the borders and pushing infrastructure southwards, and we have to, as a mirror, push the infrastructure northwards? What are we doing? The human is going to fight over resources, and nature is going to square it up. Can space, which is a global common, contested now, because when we go to the Mars and the Moon, is it going to remain a global common, or it is going to be the first occupier's advantage? I think we are into serious trouble, and I think this is a session which will bring to us certain areas that we need to invest very heavily, and therefore war is one part. I think preparation for disaster is something which is more, if not equally important. May I request, we have a panel here. I would request a special address initially by Dr. K.H. Durga. He's a group director, ISRO, deals with this specialization. And then after that, we will have speakers which are, with us. Mr. Agrawal is yet to join. I suppose I don't know whether he will come or not. But we have Major General Sudhir, Bahl, we have Suyash, Singh, we have Stephane, and we have Major Rama, Sundeep. And we will all talk about how the future of space and satellite for foreseeing, forecasting, mitigation and response while the disaster is happening, and how we go in for the recovery of the damage. I think all that we can discuss today. I wish that once we have a discussion, we have little time for our discussion also. Thank you very much. Over to Dr. Rama.
Good afternoon to the chair and all co-speakers, and good afternoon to all delegates. Today my talk is on satellites for effective disaster risk reduction. So when we discuss about disasters in the world, India is one of the worst disasters affected countries in the world. You name any disaster, it is there, maybe except volcanoes. Okay. We have floods, cyclones, forest fires, landslides, earthquakes, tsunami, everything we have. Okay. So that's why India is one of the major disasters prone countries in the world. So when we talk about disasters in the country, the major disasters that strikes to our mind is immediately super cyclone 1999. That struck the Odisha in 1999. Thousands of people were killed, lot of damage to the property. And again, after 20 years, in 2019, similar magnitude cyclone struck the Odisha coast, funny cyclone. Okay, after 20 years, almost similar magnitude. But the casualties is almost zero in Odisha. And property loss also very minimum. So what happened within this 20 years time? So because of this latest technologies, so implementing the latest technological developments in monitoring the floods or cyclones or any disasters in real time and early development of early warning systems made to minimize the damage, particularly to the human and property. Okay, so out of all the technologies, space technologies plays a major role, immense role in disaster risk reduction in the country. So how this space technology addresses the all natural disasters that I am going to discuss in my slides. Coming to the space assets for disaster risk reduction, we have different type of satellites. According to orbit, it is placed as LEOs, GEOs, lower Earth orbiting, okay, geostationary equatorial orbit, okay, middle Earth orbiting satellites, okay, and based on the mode of applications, we have satellites like communication satellites, Earth imaging satellites, and meteorological satellites. Okay, so communication satellites, we all know how communication networks is very helpful in the event of the disasters, particularly for during relief and rescue operations and movement of the NDMA personnel and movement of rescue of the victims, etc. Everybody knows that. Coming to the Earth imaging satellites, when there is a flood, it is difficult to assess what extent the flood is there. Okay, it is difficult to go. So satellites provides a near real-time information on the flood. Again, here we have two types of satellites. One is microwave satellites, another is optical imaging satellites. The floods or landslides, these are the disasters that occurs in monsoon period particularly. So it is difficult to get optical data. So we mostly depend on the microwave imaging, which penetrates through the clouds. So again, we have different type of microwave satellites of different bands, different resolutions. Similarly, optical remote sensing data are also very useful in damage assessment. Okay, and mainly during cyclones. The flooding will be less, but damage due to the winds will be very high. Damage to the urban infrastructure, damage to the buildings, etc. So where we need high resolution optical satellite data to assess the damage more accurately. So in this process, we have our Indian remote sensing satellites, a lot of optical in the optical domain, in the micro domain also. Recently we have launched RSAT 1A, we call it as US4 also, which provides the data in the microwave region. Okay. So we have morning pass and evening pass at different resolutions, at different swath, also different coverage, different extent. And in the event of disaster, we activate immediately, we get our satellite data. In absence of our Indian remote sensing satellite data, we get satellite data from free sources like Sentinel, Landslides, etc. If sometimes India is a big country, sometimes you will have floods in 4-5 states at a time, sometimes in 6 states also at a time. Okay. Right now you see there are floods in Himachal, in Uttarakhand, in Assam at a time. Okay. So the available satellites may not be sufficient. So we procure radar sat data. Even sometimes it is not sufficient. If the disaster is very big, we activate international charter, through which we get satellite data from different space agencies across the globe. About 11 to 12 space missions data we get when we activate international charter or Sentinel Asia also. Okay. So using all type of data sets, we monitor the disasters in the country. Coming to the meteorological satellites. Many people think about Earth imaging satellites only, but meteorological satellites like INSAT 3D, INSAT 3DR or NOVA satellites. Okay. These satellites provide information about the climate, okay, about the cyclones, about the rainfall, etc. Okay. So this is very useful information in early warning studies of any disasters, or floods, early warning, cyclone, early warning, etc. And when we do the modeling, when we do the simulation studies, okay, prior to the event, we need the terrain information. So different type of terrain in different modes of terrain information we can acquire, like using aerial platforms, ALTM, or drones. So this gives information on smaller areas. If you want terrain information on bigger areas, larger areas, so we have to depend on the satellite-based terrain information, satellite-based digital elevation models. Okay, like Carto digital elevation model, 10-bit resolution, Aster DEM, okay, and SRTM DEM, LOS DEM. Okay, many digital elevation models are available. Derived from the satellite remote sensing. So this is the broad usage of satellite data in the disaster risk reduction. So how we are going to use all these products in our day-to-day activities, in operational use, okay, in all the phases, that I am going to discuss. Under ISRO's disaster management support program, ISRO has established a Decision Support Center at National Remote Sensing Center, which provides a space-based information addressing all natural disasters in all phases of the disasters. Okay, if it is floods and cyclones, we monitor the floods and cyclone real time using multi-mission satellite data. We provide the images, we provide the maps, we provide the reports, etc. And using historic data, we prepare the hazard maps, and we have the early warning studies also, spatial flood early warning studies also. That I will discuss in subsequent slides. Similarly, forest fires. Okay. Using thermal remote sensing data, we monitor the forest fires at 30 to 90 minutes turnaround time. We provide information on the forest fire alerts in the country. And landslides. Landslides monitoring, landslide hazard donation, landslide forecasting. Okay. And one important thing I would like to bring it to your notice that we have one national database for emergency management, the NDMA. So it is a unique national level geoportal that addresses, that provides information about all natural disasters in the country And it provides information, we disseminates space-based information, it disseminates the services from the forecasting organizations also, like Central Water Commission, flood alerts, IMD alerts, etc. Okay. And we have international collaborations through Central Asia, through International Charter, through NSCAP, etc. through which we provide our Indian remote sensing satellite data, and we get satellite data from different space missions also. And we monitor transboundary rivers also, because sometimes flows from the transboundaries creates floods, mainly like Assam, okay, Bihar, okay, that thing also we monitor. This information we provide to the concerned user organizations like the Ministry of Home Affairs, National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, State Disaster Management Organizations, and Forest Survey of India, Geological Survey of India, concerned disasters, okay, within very minimum turnaround time. Coming to the floods and cyclones, what we do in response phase, what we do in mitigation phase, what we do in early warning phase using satellite data, that I would like to brief here. When there is any flood, when we have automated disaster watch mechanism, when there is any flood, so immediately we acquire the satellite data, we analyze it, we map it, okay, we prepare a report, how many districts are affected, how many villages are affected, how much area is affected, okay, and integrate with the geospatial data like roads, rails, relief shelters, rescue shelters, etc., okay, and disseminate to the user organizations within 3 to 4 hours turnaround time, okay. So immediately, here you can see last year when there was a flood in Godavari, this is prior to the flood, this is during the flood. Okay, so we will estimate the areas also and we will provide. Okay, these many districts are affected by the flood. So the damage estimate is more accurate using the satellite data compared to the conventional methods. Then the use of optical remote sensing data, what I was mentioning. Here you can see last year, again, Polavaram project is there in the Godavari. It was affected by the major flood last year. So complete, it is under construction actually. Complete construction area is affected, is inundated. Okay. So we provide this information in real time to them. Okay. And you can see here Fadi cyclone, what I was mentioning in the beginning, Odisha, many rooftops were blown up. Okay, because of the high winds. Okay, so that type of information also we provided. And if you recollect in 2021, one of the rare disasters that struck in the Ishiganga River, Uttarakhand. Okay, how many of you know that Uttarakhand disaster? Okay, it was a major disaster. Nobody can forecast that type of disaster. In Ishiganga, from one rock slide happened. Okay, that rock slide magnitude is equivalent to almost 40 football stadiums. Okay, that 40 football stadium size. That rock fall from a height of about 1800 meters. So that complete kinetic energy, when it fallen on the snow and ice beneath that, so complete kinetic energy got converted into heat energy, then it converted into flash flood. Okay, within 25 minutes, that flood struck that Tapovan power project. Many people were killed that time in 21. Okay, complete country was in COVID, but we were working in lab during that time. Okay, during that period, and you can see here some bridges near Tapovan. Both side bridges were washed up completely. Project was filled with sediments of 16 meters high, 16 meters thickness sediment. Okay, it took months to clear that area. Okay, so we monitored continuously using very high resolution optical remote sensing data. And this is another example of high resolution optical remote sensing data, where we monitored the landslides and damage to the roads because of the landslides. Whether the roads are restored or not, that type of information also we provide. And sometimes state governments, they ask input on flood duration. Okay, means flood duration means when we monitor the floods continuously. Like Assam is under flood last year for almost 3 months. Bihar and UP were in floods for almost 2 months. So duration also very important for damage assessment. If a village is under flooding for 2 days, the damage is different. If it is under flood for 2 weeks, the damage will be different. So when we monitor continuously, we prepare the duration maps and we provide. And sometimes Minister of Home Affairs, they ask information on the crop damage also. Okay. So in seasonal crop maps during the cyclone. Okay. And this is current present 25th June Assam floods before and after. These both are the optical images. Okay. So getting optical images during monsoon period is also rare. Whenever we get cloud-free coverages, we acquire. Okay. So it gives more clear picture compared to the villages are affected. This type of reports also we provide. Each district, how much area is affected. Okay, this information we provide within 3 to 4 hours. And you can see here our Indian remote sensing satellite EOS4 data, IRISAT 1A we call it. Okay. We have different type of sensors in that, means different swath, different resolutions. Okay. When the swath is very big, we will have coarser resolution, but the coverage will be very big. We can cover complete Assam in 2 images. Okay. When we want information at district level, we have to go for medium resolution sensor. When we want information at village level, we have to go for very fine resolution images like this. Okay. This is a medium resolution MRS means this is fine resolution. Okay. So depending upon the requirement, we have to choose the resolutions also from the same satellites. Now you see here, during last 4 years, okay, whatever may be the reasons, floods in India are spreading to many states. Okay. Earlier, because NRSC is into this business for the last 25 years, earlier we used to monitor floods in maximum 4 or 5 states only, Bihar, Assam, UP, like that. But almost 15 states are affected by the floods almost every year. Last 4 years, 14 to 15 states we mapped. Every year, more about 250 maps being provided to the disaster management organizations. More than, I can say in the last 4 years, more than 10,000 satellite images are analyzed in preparing these maps. Because we have to analyze pre-flood and during flood also. Okay. And this is about mitigation phase, what we do. So response phase, what we do. Coming to the mitigation phase, okay, we need flood hazard atlases, okay, for mainly for controlling the developmental activities, for construction of relief and rescue health shelters, etc. Okay. So having the advantage of historic satellite data, NRSC has prepared national level flood affected area atlas. Okay, released in the March only, 3rd NPDRR, complete national release in 25 satellite data. At the same time, for 6 major flood prone states, we prepared hazard maps also. But hazard maps gives the information on low hazard, medium, moderate, medium, high, very high, like 5 classes. Okay, for 6 major states we provided, but for national level, we prepared the flood affected area atlas. Important thing is flood early warning. Okay. Here you will have, apart from our remote sensing, Earth observing remote sensing satellite data, you will have, you can see the application of the digital terrain models and applications of the meteorological products, satellite based meteorological products here. Okay. Now, why we need early warning? The satellite images provides you information immediately after the event. Okay. But if you can know the information prior to the event, okay, so that the damage can be minimized more effectively. So under National Hydrology Project, we developed special flood early warning models for 2 major rivers in the country, Godavari and Tapi rivers. Okay, so spatial flood early warning. See, please remember, what is this? I will explain. Okay, generally Central Water Commission is the main pioneer organization for early warning. Okay, they give the flood alerts. Okay, using observed data using some gauge figures, correlations, some models. Okay, but spatial flood early warning means if I simulate the flood prior to the flood event using very high resolution digital terrain model and rainfall product and rainfall forecast, satellite based rainfall forecast products, if I can give a simulation, if I can tell that this village will be affected by the flood in another 2 days or 1.5 days or 3 days, and this much area will be inundated. So that will be very useful for the risk management. Okay, you can see here these models are developed and using space inputs only and very well calibrated and validated. We are running these two models operationally for the last 3 years. Now we are giving, you can see here forecast. Okay, the forecast accuracy is more than 85%, 85 to 93% we could achieve. So 2 days advance we are giving forecast in both the rivers. And this inundation simulation, the Godavari main flood plains, it is 400 kilometer stretch using ALTM digital elevation, digital terrain models we are simulating. And in this, apart from the area extent, we give the depth information and velocity of flooding also, which is very important for the damage assessment. And you can see here, once you overlay the village maps, you will know that each village, what will be that, when the village will get the flood, what will be the depth of flooding, what is the area of flooding, what is the velocity of flooding. That much precise information we are disseminating with 2 days lead time. You can see the simulation here, and at the top you can see the time also. Last year Godavari flood when we simulated, okay, 400 kilometers. That's how the flood propagated from top to bottom up to delta, and you can see the depth of flooding here. Okay. And this information we disseminate through our NDMA portal in real time. So anybody can access it. It is open portal only. Anybody can access. So how flood is increasing, how flood is receding also, you can know from this simulations. So this information is important for the relief and rescue operations. Okay. And using satellite based meteorological products and current day rainfall also, 2 days forecast rainfall, we are giving national level runoff. Okay. You can see here, this year only. If you open right now, you will get more runoff in North India. Okay. So this products also at national level we are giving at the country level. And we have flash flood vulnerability assessment system also. Okay. Why flash flood vulnerability is flash floods general recedes within 10 hours, 12 hours. Sometimes maybe it's difficult to capture using remote sensing satellites also. Okay. So you considering that, we prepared flash flood vulnerability assessment of the complete country. We have done assessment of the complete country using 100 years daily, because landslides mainly triggered due to the high intensity rainfall. Okay. Once rainfall forecast and landslide hazard area. If you intersect these two, so we are giving forecast also in these areas. You can see rainfall based daily warning in NDMA portal because of high intensity of rainfall. Okay. We are working on anyhow. Damage assessment due to earthquakes, we can do using satellite data, but earthquake forecasting is a very challenging job, which is practically not proved so far. So we are working on that. Okay, you can see here that earthquake damage assessment. Okay, Turkey earthquake recently happened, if you remember it. Okay, you can see the Turkey. This is after earthquake. Okay. Before earthquake, after earthquake. So you can do the damage, you can assess the damage more accurately. You can monitor the relief and rescue also in this. Restoration works also you can monitor. How many buildings are restored, how many roads and bridges are restored, that information also you can monitor using high resolution satellite data. Coming to the forest fires, this is also very important disaster in the country, creating a lot of damage. Okay, using thermal sensors. Different type of sensors, we wanted national level federal, forest fire alerts we disseminate in 23 itself from lakhs of forest fires, natural and man-made. Okay, stubble burning, everything we provide. And finally, whatever we do, okay, we disseminate through our national database for emergency management. If anybody interested, they can see ndem.nrsc.gov.in. This portal is open to anybody. So it is theme-specific disaster portal. Like if somebody is interested in hydrological disasters, they can see hydrological disasters. Somebody is interested in geological disasters, earthquake, landslide, they can see meteorological disasters like cyclones, everything. And other information also, everything is available. It is developed in 5 regional languages, English, Hindi, and 3 more regional languages, so that it to reach the common people more effectively. And another thing also, we have lightning information also. 23 lightning sensors are there, established by NRSC. So we provide information. It is inventory, forecast, lightning forecast we have not started yet. So we are working on that. But as of today, how many lightnings are there in the country, that information you can see here. Okay. And another good thing in NDM portal is, if you open it, the India map, okay, what are the disasters on today? That will flash here. It may be flood, it may be landslide, it may be earthquake, it may be forest fire, whatever. All disasters on that day will flash here. So if you click that, it will go to that particular portal. So mobile apps also developed. You can install mobile app also. You can download PK file from NDMA website. You can install. And we do the capacity building also, so that to train the users how to make use of space data, whatever information we are providing. Because during disasters we cannot go to the field. So state people only, they can go to the field, they can add, they can do value addition to our products and use further in disasters in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rao. Please. Dr. Rao has actually taken us through the entire journey of the capacity that the ISRO and the Indian ecosystem has towards the disaster forecast, and how during the actual disaster period, how the entire monitoring is happening. Before I go to the other panelists, just one small question, if you can very quickly answer, is that if you want that the capacity which you are lacking today, and you want to build for the future, I'm sure you have plans, how much do you want that the private industry should contribute to technology and the infrastructure to be able to develop a system that we can predict a disaster and put most of the elements together to ensure that we are not surprised and we do not have to move resources after the disaster has got stuck, and also even if the disaster is stuck, to get the real measure of how much it is so that the resources are allocated properly. Basically for the private industry to know what is for them to contribute towards the overall capacity of a country. Very quick.
Thank you. Actually, right question at right time. We have been working on this for the last 25 years. Almost things are operationalized, everything. Now we are planning to give this activity to the industry. Okay. Mainly near real-time monitoring and mapping of the disasters. Many industry people, they ask these products. Okay. For the insurance companies, they ask. Okay. Like some private organizations working disaster management, they are also asking. So we thought that let us give this activity to the industry itself. Okay. Maybe in another 1 month, if you watch our website, where RFP is being quoted, any industry who is interested to work on this, you can quote. Number 2, capacity building is very important, particularly using any advanced technology. And maybe this technology or any other technology is very much required. So we organize annual capacity building training programs. We organize training programs on how national issues for emergency management. We contribute significantly in the capacity building programs of National Institute of Disaster Management (NDMA), and we support the capacity building programs of state governments also. Okay. So still India is a big country, very population is very huge, so we need to conduct more and more capacity building programs in association with the private industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. On the panel, we have, of course, private industry represented. But before I go to Suyash and ask Stephane to talk about their expertise, I'll go to Major General Sudhir Bahl, who is an advisor with the DMA, which came into being in 2005. And I was talking about 2001 earthquake in Bhuj. Then we had tsunami 2004. We had another earthquake in 2005, and of course after that, as Dr. Rao is saying, that more and more floods are coming in. I'll ask General Bahl, what do you foresee will be the future for the DMA, and what capacities you are planning, and what are the expectations that you have from the space industry, so that you not only foresee, place your resources correctly. During the relief, how do you stay connected, and what happens, mitigation and post-relief operations? How do you want the entire landscape to be supported by technology, and where are we today? Yeah, please.
Thank you, General Pannu, sir, and very good afternoon to all my co-speakers and of course the distinguished delegates here. By way of a small introduction, my job is to basically conduct mock exercises on various disaster scenarios at the state and multi-state level. And the aim is to validate the preparedness and also the response capabilities. When we look at it, we are looking at right from what has been done to prepare for early warning, to build capacities to respond. Then once early warning is received, what preemptive action is taken, how effectively is it taken, how are warnings distributed to various people, last mile, and thereafter, once the disaster strikes, how do you build situational awareness? How do you get to know what is exactly happening? So that your response is targeted towards the areas which are worst affected, and response is effective. Any major disasters, resources are always going to be short, and therefore this aspect is extremely important. The last thing is, during a disaster, especially earthquakes, cyclones, etc., your mobile communications will become non-existent. So how do you communicate? And how do you continue to function in an effective manner? So these are the things I look at. And from this point of view, just as a preamble, both the speakers mentioned how disasters are increasing in frequencies, etc. And the statistics in the last 20 years, the numbers of disasters have doubled, and the losses have also doubled, both economically and in lives. You would have all heard of the Sendai framework of disaster risk reduction, which was initiated in 2015, and by 2030 it has certain targets. Now, the midterm review of the Sendai framework was recently carried out a couple of months back at the UN, and the outcome is not at all encouraging. Despite various mitigation measures, various actions that have been taken, the targets in terms of reducing loss of lives, livelihoods, economic damage have not been met. The situation today is that disasters are increasing not only in frequency, new types of disasters coming about. So urban floods, which are a rare occurrence, are increasing in frequency. You had Sydney, you had Bangalore, you had, so many, Mumbai has been having it, Chennai, even Delhi is susceptible to it. So what are we doing about it? Forest fires are increasing in frequency. The threat of GLOF, glaciated lake outburst floods, many of us wouldn't have heard of it. But climate change is adding to these threats, and the last issue is unpredictability. So while we are making models, the NDMA has said, okay, these are the areas which are vulnerable, but what is happening? Floods are coming in areas which have not seen floods, so this data is not going to work for you. You have to be prepared for something new, something unpredictable, which has not happened. So how do you go about it? Now, in terms of disaster management, you are all aware of the disaster management cycle. It has 4 or 5 phases, and space technology has a role to play in all of it. And unless we leverage technology, we are not going to be able to get ahead of the curve to fight disasters effectively. Now, how do we leverage technology? So let's start first with early warning. Now, these early warnings have to be based on satellite imagery data and ground sensor data. But these have to be prepared by specialists. And pardon my saying so, NDMA is doing a part of it, but this point has been given to them earlier also by NDMA and Ministry of Home. This is best left to specialists. So if you're looking at cyclone warning, it is the IMD which is doing this, it is their job. NDMA is providing the satellite imagery, they're providing the inputs for this. And so is the NRSC. Similarly, CWC is the authority for doing flood mapping, flood forecasting, etc. So while these two models have been made, but these have to be made at the CWC. As things progress, things have to be decentralized. Now CWC, NDM, CWC, NRSC, manpower is limited, resources are limited. Where all can they look? Now for example, Assam is hit by floods. Simultaneously you are having floods in Bihar, Uttarakhand also. Can they look at all three simultaneously? So each state has to have the capacity to be able to generate what I would use the term integrated flood picture. We are not talking of it now. And what is this integrated flood picture? Inputs coming from satellite imagery, inputs coming from UAV and drone imagery, inputs coming from low altitude satellites which have been launched in response to a disaster, which is what we are going to be looking at in future, and which is where the industry can come in to provide this capability. So there is a flood warning, next 2 days likelihood of floods, the Met data and everything giving you. This satellite is launched over that area. So you get this real-time information as of now. This entire information fused, presented in a decision support system in the operations room, the emergency operations center as it is called of the state, to allow them to take a decision. As of now, they have to go to the NDM, log in. What happens if the satellite communications fail? The normal communications fail? So this is where the industry can come. The second part is communications. All this data is available, information is available. Are we able to have foolproof, redundant communication during disaster? The answer is we are primarily relying on PHL communications, and that is radio communications, right? And there is a multiplicity of users in disaster management. I will, at the cost of repetition, highlight this point here. Disaster management is a whole of the government, whole of the society approach. General Pannu mentioned war. There are only two endeavors, governmental endeavors, where all agencies are involved: war and disaster management. So when you are having so many users, armed forces, paramilitary forces, the SDRF, the NDRF, all are using a plethora of radio sets. How do they intercommunicate? As of now, this is a major challenge. What is happening is the emergency operation centers have a radio net over there, and all these, various agencies, they place their communication detachments there. So I have to talk to the army, I will tell him, he will pass a message. Now there are applications available, I'm aware. I think Inmarsat has come in with an application called LTAC, which links all types of VHF radio sets and allows them to communicate with each other. Not only this, it extends the range. They don't need repeaters on ground. So this is something we need. This is something which again the industry can come up with, which is very important. Right? So I spoke of integrated picture, disaster. How do you fuse all this data? On-demand satellites for monitoring of disasters and these communication. The next thing that is important is you were talking about GLOF. Now GLOF you can monitor, landslides you can monitor, but rainfall is not just sufficient to give early warning. You need ground sensors over there which are looking at the slope stability, which are looking at what is the soil conditions, which will give you a warning. Okay, landslide is likely to occur. Avalanche is likely to occur. So these remote sensors in hostile environment, which are placed, these have to be linked, uplinked. How are they linked? Through satellite communication. And this information thereafter is analyzed, and you are able to generate early warning. We are trying to do this in the landslide early warning system. We are also trying to do it in GLOF. But what is the problem? There was a project in Sikkim. Unfortunately, in India, there's a problem of vandalization and theft. So these half of these sensors were stolen or vandalized. Now technology is available where the moment a sensor is being vandalized or theft, you get an alert. You can have systems like electric wire around it or something which is activated. So these technologies are available. This is again something which the industry needs to look at so that we are able to have a comprehensive early warning system. And last very important thing is last mile dissemination of early warnings. Now we have a Sachet portal you were mentioning. Sachet is basically, we have a common analytic protocol based on which once the moment you get an early warning, how it works is you draw a polygon on a map, it will capture all the mobile numbers on that map in that polygon, and this warning will be automatically sent to them. The problem is this warning is based on a mobile communication system. However, India has now come up with a Navic constellation of GPS satellites. The Navic inputs are also being enriched with this information of disaster early warnings. The issue is that not all mobile phones in our country carry a chipset which is compatible GPS-wise with the Navic system. I think from my information only Qualcomm is one company which is manufacturing this chipset, mobile phones which are uplinking with the Navic GPS system. Rest all looking at whether it's GLONASS or whether it's the American GPS system or the European, these counts. So there is a very important need for the industry to come up with this chipset and integrate it with all our mobile systems. METI has already been told of this requirement by the NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority. And if any of you are looking to foray into this aspect, what is the future? Future lies in, again, a very huge opportunity. Inmarsat is one company, I can give an example. They're looking at end-to-end solution for disaster management. Right? If there's an early warning system requiring for tsunami sirens, in why they've set up the system, all these 500 sirens are linked not only through mobile communication but also through satellite communication. So there's a redundancy and they are activated in case of tsunami. We don't have it. So they are providing end-to-end solution for including electro-optical imaging, your SAR imaging, etc., providing visual updates, and they are looking at what we call in the services and for all equipment, womb to tomb, concept of looking at disaster management. So there's a huge opportunity. If some player takes a leap into this, I think it's a very big opportunity. So I'll finish with that, sir.
Thank you, General Bahl. You've covered a huge canvas of the preparation and the future, how we can do whatever disaster management in a more efficient manner. Just one idea that I want to give here is that the disaster management has a technique, of course, it has skill sets, but number of bricks which need to be placed ahead of time, geographically spread in an area, where you predict or you do not predict where you can get surprised, are actually huge. Every state government, every district, every place has to have a disaster management brick. And certain things have a longer shelf life and certain things do not have shelf life. For example, you have to have medicines, you need to have implements, you need to have tools, earth moving equipment, which cannot be just kept there, but is already made to work, which can be pulled from somewhere. And also the list of number of contractors who can be actually pulled in and moved in a certain direction, by air, by road, by rail, by any which way, even by sea or water. All these things contribute towards having a disaster management bricks available. So I think the private industry can largely contribute towards it. So thank you very much, General Bahl. He is a consultant to the NDMA. From one consultant, I go to another consultant. Stephane, you've heard what we have with us and what we foresee. Could you, in whatever you're going to say, tell us what are the global best practices that you think are there and from where India can adopt those global best practices for our own future? Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking along those lines. So Euroconsult is a team of industry analysts. Essentially, we monitor who's doing what in space, and the disaster management area is one that's always been there. It used to be mainly about maps, mainly about preparedness before the event. Now there's actually quite a lot going on along different technology lines. Disaster response is always a big test of your satellite capabilities because it really brings whole of government cooperation into line. It's, I think, often even less predictable than war in the forms it takes and where it strikes. You need to know absolutely everything about the area where the disaster happened from. You said where the medicines are stored, but it's also in an earthquake hazard map, for instance. It's not just the seismic risk, it's exactly how the buildings are put together. The Turks discovered that in their display when they found that they had earthquake preparedness maps, but they didn't quite have accurate information on how the buildings would respond. And so that's not accessible necessarily to the satellites. It has to come from various databases which have to be integrated. The satellite industry is actually good at integrating things from various sources because of all the defense experience, because of the satellites usually being the crossroads between a lot of industries, a lot of different communities, which often come into contact, utilities and the military, only when a disaster strikes. The other thing is that the disaster response community they're not patient customers. Once they're in business, they don't care how you do it. They don't care that you have satellites. Your gear has to work. An example comes to mind of the fire response department. They had been given some display technology that could give them fire maps made by satellites and so on into trucks. And then when the equipment didn't work, the guys chucked it out of the trucks. They kicked it out of the trucks because it was taking up space and it was getting on their nerves. So they're worse than the army in that respect. Now, as I said, the field used to be largely about maps. It's hard to segment because there's so many things that can come under the level of disaster. Let me try before, during, and after what's going on. So before, to give you a couple of examples, dam rupture. There's a big field right now which is monitoring tailing dams. That comes after a big mining operation in Brazil. Their dam burst. Those things are not monitored. big artificial lakes, nobody's watching them because they are junk, basically. That this is just where a mine is pulling its tailings, and the sediment accumulates until the map ruptures. That happened in Brazil a few years ago. People got killed. A lot of mud suddenly came out of the dam. Various companies, in Mossad as it happened, was pushing that first. And putting up monitoring systems that include a clinometer, which is a device that tells you in minute fractions of a degree per day how much the dam is, how much the ground is moving, basically, and an IoT system, which tells you, which sends you an alert, hey, this dam is moving more than the ground can support, it's going to burst. Do something about it. It's really life-saving, but IoT is one of the revolutions in the field. There's been a few defining moments in disaster response. One was probably Hurricane Katrina in the US, where the first responders discovered that they had no satellite phone, that they had no capability to communicate, and they had to jury rig up with equipment donated by broadcasters and so on. So that situation got resolved. I think India probably stands out for the extremely tight controls it places on satellite phones. I know a lot of police forces and disaster and first responders are on the list to get satellite phones, but if those things keep being controlled like nuclear weapons, when you really need them in an emergency, you're going to find that it's not just the guys on the list who need to communicate, because the needs are very, very broad. Another watershed was the earthquake in Haiti in 2010, where a flood of responders came to that little place because Haiti was really totaled by the earthquake that happened then. And satellite phones got in short supply, and the capacity on the satellite constellations got maxed out for months because all the communications networks were down. So the communication industry has actually turned around and developed cellular base stations on wheels that can be deployed rapidly. Cellular networks can now be restored pretty fast. But in the critical few days after the disaster, it's all about VSATs. And then the equipment has to get into the field instantly, because the needs are in the first hours. That's when the first responders are coming in. They have to call in because they need another piece of equipment, because they found a place where maybe somebody's buried under the debris. They cannot wait one day to get the equipment cleared through customs. It has to be in their hands instantly. It has to be provisioned. What happens during the event is actually quite interesting. There's a few systems that at the top end of this, some countries have put together extremely integrated response systems. Japan, for instance, has a network, at least it's beautiful on paper. I'm not sure to what extent it actually works every day, but it goes all the way from sensors in the deep sea that are watching the fault to where the fire front is approximately, knowing exactly, and so deploying your trucks and your planes at the right time, at the right place. It all has to work perfectly in real time with the data coming into the hands of the people in the trucks who can respond to it. It's a staff job. In the military, very few people are equipped to get real-time space data. But here you have more people who need this. Lightning detection, you mentioned that's a hard thing to do. There's also sensors that come in. In advance of the disasters, there's a lot of work in parametric flood insurance, where all the financial might of the insurance industry is being combined with new fleets of radar satellites to come up with maps that are down to the single building level to estimate what the insurers want to know what their exposure is. And so is it a rich building or a poor building? But those things are also applicable for the first responders. And here those are really new developments. There's a parametric insurance is becoming one of the key markets for satellite imagery. Post-event, there's things happening also. I think they're mainly in terms of communications, restoring communications. I wouldn't say it's an easier thing to do, but technologically, the difficulty is really before and during. And like I said, there's quite a lot going on. That answers your question?
Thank you very much, Stephane. You spoke about the IoT. In my experience, what was important in disaster response was to save lives in the field. Whatever has happened has happened. But what is now to be done is to save lives. And if you cannot communicate, if you can't establish telemedicine centers, if people on ground cannot ask for help and ask for right resources, and all those things have to be put together. So you have actually brought the use of internet, you've brought the communication, which is very important. Since we are running out of time, I will request Suyash to talk about his own competence of GalaxEye. What clientele are you preparing to serve and how?
Speak from here, if you don't mind. Alright. Yeah, so I won't take a lot of time. I think very briefly let me introduce myself and then answer your question. So I am Suyash, co-founder and CEO at GalaxEye Space. We are an early stage startup, 2 years into business, very early in fact. We raised some capital in last 2 years and trying to build a satellite. The satellite is a little unique in the ways that how we are trying to do Earth observation is a little different from the people that are already doing. So what we do is we fuse data with multiple sensors using multispectral and SAR together from the same satellite. Now how it benefits people is it's kind of a co-registration that happens on board and helps people visualize, which is difficult from what you can do from SAR and at such resolutions. So my motivation to kind of join this panel was to really discuss the opportunities that is there when you fuse data. I think there's a sophisticated market which understands what is SAR, and they can use in multiple situations and disaster being one. So they can understand what is SAR, or maybe there are some tools that they can use to understand SAR, load the SAR imagery and derive data from that, derive insights from that. But there's an unsophisticated market like agriculture or people who are serving agriculture, insurance and other places who doesn't know what is SAR. Right? And most of the time they struggle using SAR. So the idea is, can we get a high resolution SAR which has the real properties in it and complement that with a multispectral imagery which analysts can actually understand. So long story short, our clientele is pretty much what we're targeting is to serve insurance companies who are focused on agriculture. The reason behind that is, there's a disaster response that happens, but post-disaster response, we need to rebuild and redo what was there before the disasters. And the damage needs to be really quantified in a lot of ways, and there has to be certain capital that a person can actually utilize. And that capital can come from multiple places. Generally, we get compensations from governments and other places. But we need to involve capital markets like insurance and finance people to come in and help them rebuild the life that they were living before the disasters. Right? So, and that quantification is super important because maybe a farmer A has invested a lot more money than farmer B, to do farming and to establish their businesses. But we don't know who needs what kind of compensation after the disasters. Right? So, in a nutshell, the idea is to rebuild the lives after a disaster has occurred. After whatever struggles they have gone through, and then enable the industry, at least the capital markets, to really enter into this and help people to rebuild and relive the lives that they were living before the disasters. And I feel as bunch of IIT Madras graduates, we really came out of college and thought if there's a way to contribute to the climate change, I think this is one of the ways. And especially in India, agriculture is one thing that gets most affected. In case of floods, it's something like tomatoes going 120 rupees per kg, and other things going disasters and bizarre. Such things has to be controlled in some fashion, and probably this is one of the ways that we can do it.
Thank you, Suyash. You spoke about how the technology can bring in a major change in the forecasting and mitigation and, of course, the response mechanism. I think the worst disaster is when we cannot respond to it. If there is a natural disaster and we cannot respond to a natural disaster, is a bigger man-made disaster because we did not prepare for it. And therefore, I think it is the second disaster that I'm talking about that we don't want to get. All we can do is hope for the best, but we need to prepare for the worst. And I think it is more worst than the best which we foresee, because the load on the earth and the technology that is empowering human beings to actually take out more from the earth that it can provide. I think we need to forewarn ourselves and prepare. I think we've simply run out of time. If there is one pressing question, I knew that would happen. You may like to ask one, yes please.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, if you speak louder, maybe.
I'll come close. Can you hear me? My name is Bahl. So the speakers have covered all the land-based disasters very well, earthquakes, fires, floods, etc. My question is regarding disaster at sea. More particularly, for example, a major oil spill, which can, as you're aware, close down a nuclear power station, a thermal station, close down a port, which means all trade comes down. So I have two questions. Are the authorities categorizing this disaster into their plan, number one, because there is no early warning? And number two, is there an integration between the remote sensing data that you are providing and the ground people are actually combating this Coast Guard?
Actually, I missed those slides in my presentation. We do monitor oil spills also, oil spills, and sometimes ships got burned in the ocean. So those studies also we do. During oil spills, using micro data only, what extent the spill is, and how using some modeling techniques, how the oil spill will move, in which direction it will move, what rate it will move. Those studies also, and we provide to the mainly to the Coast Guard, Indian Navy. They ask the study. We provide. We do that.
If I may chime in, oil spill detection is actually one of the more mature areas of remote sensing. There's automated systems that work day in, day out on a fairly large scale. And you challenged us on disasters at sea, but disasters in the air also. A little bit along the same lines as oil spill detection. There's a path field which is volcanic ash detection. You may recall a few years ago, there was a big volcanic eruption in Iceland which paralyzed half of the airports of Europe because nobody could quite find out where this very fine ash was floating about in the air. Had to be done with planes, and it was a risky job to go in and risk your plane's engines into this ash to find out where the ash was. It's tough to detect by satellite, but it's one of the research fronts in the community now.
Oil spills are actually not a conventional kind of disaster, so they are not within the purview of the NDMA, right? But let me tell you this, each type of disaster has got a nodal ministry which is responsible for taking care of this. As far as oil spills are concerned, they are classified as a major crisis, and they are handled by the crisis management group, which is there at the national level. And the Ministry of Environment is the one which actually is the nodal ministry which looks into this. So they coordinate all this action. So the information that they're going to share is not only going to go to Coast Guard and Navy, it is going to go to this group, and they will decide what is to be done, how is it going to be actioned now, etc.
I've seen these response mechanisms. I think the Cabinet Secretary quickly calls all the experts on a given disaster, whether it is a crisis, and the response mechanism in any case starts off on ground, under whose purview and whose responsibility it falls. While the machinery on ground continues to work, the Cabinet Secretary is the one which allocates more, less, and if any reorientation is required or any more response is required. But thankfully, India has come to a point, and thanks to the NDMA, that India has been able to get its own act together without looking at external help. I think that is one big thing that has happened. I think we all need to not only be happy here, but need to prepare for more, because we should not feel so satisfied with ourselves that tomorrow we go back and ask for external help. I think we need to invest much more in future disasters. Thank you all. That is left for me is to thank my panelists who...
Samya, please.
At the disaster, time disaster.
So I just, there was a point which Stephane said, so I just need to add to that. So I come from the SATCOM fraternity. Thank you. There are two parts which I would like to highlight. Firstly, like Dr. Rao mentioned, we did a lot of work in Turkey, and we had sent these NDMA teams, and you'll be happy to know that the man-portable terminals which the NDMA team carried, they were able to establish communication with India using that. So my point comes from on two lines. So one is on the SATCOM bandwidth part, which Stephane mentioned that in Italy it was a choke point. So the answer to that, I feel, is one, whatever geostationary satellites we have with the ISRO, that's one. Secondly, the new generation LEO satellites, which were alluded to in the morning, OneWeb, which is the next one which is coming in. So that is the second answer to it. And so I feel it's most important to have the ability to make these small terminals reach the site fast. And that the only way to do that is to have these man-portable terminals, or QDAs as we call them. They should be kind of built up a lot in capacity in the country. Thank you very much, sir. I'm so sorry that I delayed you for 2 minutes.
Oh, thank you for your valuable input. Ayushi, please.
Thank you, sir. So, since we've discussed about how crucial the satellites are and how they can help us in prediction as well as reduction of disasters, the next session that we will have will take a step ahead on that and will discuss on the governance and how smart governance can be done with satellites. So I would like to thank all the speakers, and thank you, Pannu sir, for moderating the session and for helping us bring out the details about satellite and how they can help in the disaster risk reduction. Now we'll be heading for lunch, and we'll be reconvening at 2:30 after lunch, and I'll request all of you to join us back after that. The lunch for speakers would be in the Oval Hall, the main one that we have, and for the rest of the delegates in the Regency Ballroom. Thank you so much everyone for your attention and for joining us here for the session.